initially commercially successful due to its platform, Sonic CD has gained a great deal of reappraisal in the years since its launch 30 years ago. One of the more abstract games in the series, Sonic CD was the first game to feature many mainstay characters such as Amy Rose and Metal Sonic. Released for the ill-fated Sega CD, or Mega CD, outside of North America, it is often considered the best game on the platform and was the only mainline Sonic game released on a Sega add-on. The game's development is an interesting topic, and new info has been released on it recently. As I've been spending the last year not covering Sonic CD, I figure it's finally time to cover Sonic CD. Let's begin! Hi everyone, I'm MotemCat, and today I'll be looking at the development of Sonic CD.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do?
In 1992, Sonic was one of, if not the most recognizable characters in pop culture at the time. After only 1 year of, existence, Sonic was absolutely dominating trends. The launch of Sonic 2 would seal the deal for Sonic. During the development of CD, a new mechanic was on the team's mind: time travel. The idea had been explored in the early stages of Sonic 2's development, as can be seen in this concept art, but was not possible under the time and technological constraints. To take advantage of the new hardware, Sonic Team would implement time travel into the game. Two endings can be found: a good ending, which occurs if you've collected each time stone, and a bad ending, which occurs if you've not collected them. In the game, the player can travel from present, which is neutral, to past or future. The concept is quite interesting and works well in the setting of the gameplay. Unlike the direct sequels to Sonic, CD was done by Sega of Japan, with Naoto Oshima handling the directorial role. The initial idea was a CD version of Sonic 1, thus the final game is much closer in style to Sonic 1 than Sonic 2. Early on in development, a level was created which was known for years as R2 or Round 2, a scrapped second level initially placed between Palmtree Panic and Collision Chaos, which was scrapped for unknown reasons. In January 2023, it was revealed that the level's actual name was Dubious Depths. Though we have no official reason, according to the cutting room floor, there are numerous reasons that the level could have been scrapped. In a 2011 tweet, developer Masato Nishimura said that Dubious Depths was cut because Sonic CD was supposed to shift between speed-oriented, odd-numbered stages, and technical, platforming-based, even-numbered stages. Both Dubious Depths and Collision Chaos, Nishimura recalled, had been designed as platforming-based, so the decision was made to cut Dubious Depths, but keep Collision Chaos. However, in a 2022 tweet, Nishimura provided a different reason. Dubious Depths' music data did not fit within a CD-ROM, which, coupled with the tight schedule, forced its removal. Several pieces of concept art were made for the game before its release. One of the earliest is this concept art of Little Planet, dated March 12, 1992, almost a year and a half before the game's initial release. For whatever reason, this has times of day for each stage, and percentages by each of them showing how much control Eggman had over them, supposedly. This is actually notable for featuring Dubious Depths. The character Metal Sonic's original name was Mecha Sonic. It is most likely a coincidence that this shares its name with the other Robot Sonic from Sonic 2, as both were being developed at around the same time by different development teams. It was changed for obvious reasons. Numerous reference sheets were created for the opening and closing animations of the game by Studio Junio. Here they are. Here's an old special stage, and here's a slightly new but still unfinished special stage. The title screen was changed multiple times and went from CD Sonic to Sonic CD. First is the 0.02 prototype, which is the earliest to date with a build date of December 4th, 1992, 9 whole months before the release date. The title screen runs at a higher resolution and a much higher frame rate, which was most likely scaled down due to memory concerns. This is the only prototype with any reference to Dubious Depths, which is in the time trial menu, though it cannot be played. At this point in development, Palmtree Panic was known as Salad Plain, which was most likely changed to the odd nature of the name, Getting a good future isn't possible in this build of the game, though files of it are in the ROM. Some of Sonic's animations are buggy, and his peel-out animation is not implemented yet. Sonic's spring frame is almost the same from Sonic 1, but his shoe has a stripe on it in the prototype. The goalpost at the end says "You Say," an apparent pun on "You Say," the event where the build was featured. This would be changed to the Sonic sign we all know and love. Sound files were changed. For example, Sonic You Can Do Anything has a different vocal track, and Palmtree Panic's past music was changed from CD audio to a sequenced mix, though it is still the same composition. Time traveling doesn't work and instead just restarts the level. There are 2 item boxes that don't appear in the final game, one being a blue ring that gives Sonic speed and invincibility, as well as a clock item which is meant to freeze time for a second, but it's incomplete. Pressing start on controller 2 spawns a second Sonic, which player 2 will now be able to control. Collecting 50 rings does not spawn a special stage ring at the end of the level, as it is not implemented yet. If the player gets a game over, beats Salad Plain Zone 2, a screen will be seen that says "Coming Soon," which can be accessed through the sound test in the final game. There are several broken or unfinished objects from the game, but Object 23 has actual graphics, though they appear to be unfinished still. This is meant to represent some kind of projectile object, but goes unused. Object 25 appears to be a bridge that as soon as it is spawned, breaks, and Object 27 is an unfinished tilting platform. There are tons of unused sprites in this prototype, so we're just gonna go through these right quick. Here's a black and white death sprite, which is also present in the 1996 port of the game, a few unused rolling sprites, which these other ones that are actually used in the final game, just not in this prototype, a sprite of Sonic looking over his shoulder, which is present in the final game, an animation of Sonic sneeze, an animation of Sonic waving his arms, which could have been used for a water level, a couple frames of animation of Sonic hanging down on something, which was changed in the final version, a secondary herd animation grabbed from Sonic 1, which is used in the final game, a sprite of Sonic grabbing an air bubble, also used in the final game, a sprite of Sonic drowning, also used in the final game, and a sprite of Sonic hanging on a pole, also used in the final game. Here's an entire unused set of Sonic's mini form, which appears to be incomplete. And last but not least, parts of a bridge, which, although they are loaded into VRAM, go completely unused. There are only 2 unused sounds in the ROM. One is the stereo variant of the opening FMV audio, and the other is an early time travel sound. Palmtree Panic's past music also sounds different. Setting RAM value 0xFFF75E to 01 will activate Sonic's mini form, used in the final's Metallic Madness. There are some layout differences, but we don't have many to go through here since the only zones that are playable are Salad Plain, or Palmtree Panic, Acts 1 and 2, with their past and bad future variants as well. Here's the differences between the proto and final for Act 1. Act 2's yellow spring that bounces Sonic away from the goal is missing, and some things aren't here in the past and bad future. And that's all for 0.02. Now we move on to 5.10, which has a build date of May 10th, 1993. The title screen here still says CD Sonic instead of Sonic CD, and is the exact same as the 0.02 prototype. The title screen has this unused different song. Every zone has its own unique flower in this build. Here's a quick run-through. Palmtree Panic, Collision Chaos, Tidal Tempest, Quartz Quadrant, Wacky Workbench, Stardust Speedway, and Metallic Madness. Though the special stage isn't playable, a demo can be seen if you wait on the title screen. There are no UFOs, the layout is an earlier version of Special Stage 2, there are oil slicks that aren't in the final, and the message, "The programmer has a nap. Hold out, programmer," possibly a developer joke, is flashing on the screen at all times. Lastly, there are 2 unused special stage maps. The next prototype is very similar to 5.10, but just slightly different. This prototype is known as Ver 0.28a or version 0.28a, and was built literally 2 days after 5.10 on May 12th, 1993. But this prototype has minimal differences from 5.10, so I won't be going over any changes present. Next is version 0.51. With the build date of June 21st, 1993, this build is much more similar to the final, but still has a good amount of differences. The title screen finally says Sonic CD instead of CD Sonic. Music doesn't stop when the game is paused, there's not any indication of time travel on the HUD, almost all, if not all, of the PCM sounds are implemented now. When time traveling, the sound used is a CD audio track instead of an FM sound like in earlier versions, or a PCM track like the final build. Interestingly, the sound is still on the final disc of the game, and can be heard if the CD is inserted into an audio disc player. The Badniks teleporter makes no sounds when destroyed, giant rings make sounds when entering, but do not animate when you jump into them. The special stage demo is actually controllable, and blue ring monitors instead give Sonic an invisible shield that can be stacked with a normal shield. The clock monitor still works as it did in earlier prototypes. There are a few interesting audiophile differences. Most of the past music tracks have been implemented by this point, but several are different. For example, Palmtree Panic's final tempo is implemented, except for the drums, which are still at the tempo of the prototype, which makes for a disjointed clash of instruments that makes me feel like I am losing my mind. Lastly, for changed audio, we have Tidal Tempest Past Mix, which is slightly faster. Honestly, this is one of my favorites from the Sonic CD OST, and I might like it more than the final version. As this build is the first with playable special stages, there are tons of differences. For example, the UFOs look completely different and are the same from early pre-release screenshots. The blue UFO, which appears when the player has 20 seconds left from the final, is not present. The game has a high chance of jumping to a black screen in emulators if Sonic exits the level or touches water. Touching the water shows glitched tiles instead of actual splash water graphics. If the game doesn't softlock, the results screen shows that all the time stones are collected regardless of the actual amount of time stones the player has. Most of the objects don't work yet, Sonic's controls are very different, rings aren't present, and there is an unused object that flashes press start on screen. That's all for 0.51. Next is the 0.70 prototype. This version of the game was built on July 12, 1993, and was just dumped 4 years ago in 2019. Though the build has the Sonic CD title screen, the game is still internally referred to as CD Sonic. Save files in this proto can be used in the final version, and vice versa. Getting all the time stones doesn't automatically destroy our robot transporters, which means you can't use this method to get all good futures, and you can use debug mode in Time Attack, which was apparently changed to discourage cheating. Kind of odd considering this was before console online multiplayer. A big problem with this build is the fact that the jump sound doesn't properly work in normal stages, though it does function in special stages. The Super Peel Out has no SFX, and Sonic says "Yeah!" instead of "Yes!" when he gets an extra life. The title screen music is the same as 5.10, and there are numerous differences from previous prototypes as well as some smaller changes. Several cheats are present for various things like a level select, a sound test, and a debug mode. There are tons of layout changes that I don't really have nearly enough time to get into here, so I'll move on. The last prototype version is 1.05, also known as 801. 801 was built on August 1st, about 5 days from the Japanese release date. The build was sent out as a review copy. Basically, every change is just a patch from previous versions, making this the closest version to the final game. And for anyone in the comments who asked me to cover the 409 prototype, it's actually a hoax made by Sonic Fancy member Nemesis, you're welcome. Now we move on to the final build of the game. Specifically, we're starting with unused graphics. All of these are unused sprites of Sonic's. We're going to go right through these. A black and white death sprite also found in the original Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic being electrocuted, Sonic walking and waving his arms, Sonic looking backwards, Sonic sneezing, Sonic upside down, Sonic grabbing, Sonic on a horizontal pole, Sonic with his chest forward, Sonic falling, which is corrupted, but the sprites are restored in the 1996 Windows port where they also go unused, Sonic rolling, also corrupted but restored in the 1996 Windows port, and finally some unused sprites of Amy leaning forward. Bonus points in the comments to anyone who can tell me how many times I said Sonic. In Palmtree Panic, there is an unused object that moves downwards and then disappears after a bit. This is referred to in the files as Object 04. According to the leftover symbol data found in Sonic Gems collection, this object is called Taki, which translates to waterfall. With some modifications to the code, it would have looked something like this. Collision Chaos has an unused circling teleporter object that teleports Sonic to a nearby teleporter. 3 of these spawn at the same time and rotate. Tidal Tempest has a large platform, a thin platform, and these electric beams. And Quartz Quadrant has some more boring unused objects, but there's an Easter egg in it that I just have to mention. By going in debug mode in Quartz Quadrant Zone 1 Pass, there exists an inaccessible room with CX written in tiles on the wall. CX, or CXX more notably, is the signature of Masato Nishimura, also known as Majin, who designed many of the levels in Sonic CD. In Quartz Quadrant Zone 2 Present, there is another signature which uses the full CXX name. Stardust Speedway only has 2 unused objects, one being light edges and the other being placeable mesh objects. These are duplicates of the mesh files that can be placed as objects. Metallic Madness has an unused trapdoor object that was used in prototypes but was removed for unknown reasons in the final build. And lastly, the special stage actually has lots of unused sprites and art. Most notable are the Sonic sprites. Here's one of Sonic waiting, one of Sonic hanging, being pulled up by something, Sonic slipping, Sonic shrugging and sinking, Sonic leaping and landing, Sonic jumping, and these 2 non-Sonic items, which are an oil slick and a hand item. Here are a bunch of unused background chunks meant for various special stages. There is also an unused secret special stage. This is meant as a little Easter egg, and you can play it by setting all of the sound test selections to 07. According to a former Sega Europe QA tester, an 8th time stone was originally collectible here. If the player were to collect this, all the ring monitors in the level would be replaced with the unused S monitors, which would grant the player invincibility and a speed boost. In 2013, Christian Whitehead released some unused sprites for the scrapped level Dubious Depths, or R2. These sprites consist of Badniks and the level's boss. By accessing the sound test, you can find some developer-made images. There's art of Tails holding some sunglasses with a card behind him that says, "See you next game." There's a Batman tribute, this little cute Sonic drawing that says, "You are cool" by Sanchansu. How cool is that? There's this goofy art of what can only be described as a rap battle with Metal Sonic and Sonic, DJ'd by Eggman, and this art that many people think is quite creepy. The Japanese text on this image says, "Infinite Fun, Sega Enterprises," image by Majin. For a long time, there was a rumor that Majin was a word for devil or demon, due to the writing in kanji meaning a supernatural being with human-like or godlike qualities. In reality, though, Majin is the childhood name of developer Masato Nishimura. There exists a screen in the files that simply says, "Coming soon." This screen was used as far back as the 0.02 prototype and somehow made its way into the final game. Now we move on to the final thing I'm covering today, regional differences. Though there are some small ones like the copyright text on the title screen, I think the most infamous one is the soundtrack. See, the Japanese and European soundtracks were made to appeal to the West. They were modeled after club acts of the 90s, think C&C Music Factory, and used samples from bands like the Stone Roses, Public Enemy, and even Kiss of all bands. It was made to appeal to the West and specifically to America, but unfortunately it was changed to an alternate soundtrack. Though this soundtrack is good, it lacks the magic of the Japanese version in my personal opinion. An interesting miscommunication, however, is that screen from earlier. See, in Japan, the screen was actually meant to be funny. On the Japanese soundtrack of the game, the boss music, which is the music that played on that screen, sounds like this. But in America, it sounds like this. Yeah, quite the difference in tone. And with that, this episode comes to a close. It's hard to believe that this year Sonic CD will turn 30 years old, and it's even harder to believe that the game is still relevant today, if not even more so than when it was released in 1993. This stands as my favorite 2D Sonic game, and one of my favorite games of all time. For anyone looking for even more info on the development of Sonic CD, check out the Cutting Room Floor page for the game. Link in description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.
Sonic the Hedgehog CD from Mega CD.